Hi, welcome to the British English Hub. I'm Paul, and today we're going to be talking about giving advice, meaning giving advice to another person who might be seeking advice. Okay, so we're going to be sort of focused on a particular context today. That context being jobs, looking for a job. Now, that's what we're going to be looking at today. This is what we call functional language. Okay, the most popular chunks of language or language chunks. We'll start off with the doubts in your mind about job hunting. We've all experienced this in our lives, including myself. Okay, so when you're going through a sort of a period where you can't find a job, you ask yourself these questions. So I don't know where to look. I don't know what agencies to register with. I don't know where to seek advice. There are so many different sources of advice we can seek, but anyway, sometimes it's very confusing. I don't know how to answer interview questions. That's a very common one. I don't know what body language to adopt, and body language means the way you come across physically, and I don't know how to fill in an application form. Okay, so these are some examples of doubts that we might carry in our mind. Okay, so basically, here are two questions. Can you give me some advice about looking for the right job? We're using the noun advice with a C. Can you advise me on finding the right job? Advice with an S being the verb. That's a common mistake among second language speakers, confusing the nouns with the verbs, which have a very subtle difference in spelling. Okay, so here we are. Now, first of all, we use the second conditional, and this is the example here. Uh, I would, I'd look on a popular website such as Indeed or Jobs AC UK. I would look or I'd look. Now, the most commonly used phrase is the contraction I'd look. Okay, so when we're giving advice, when we're imparting advice, please try and use a contraction. It's more natural. Okay, I'm going to try and teach you the natural expressions today. Okay, I'd start with Googling agencies which specialize in your profession. That's very good advice. I'd register as unemployed and seek advice at the Job Centre Plus, an organisation that deals with unemployed people, okay, in the UK. I'd buy a book on interview skills and adopt the STAR method. Okay, the STAR method is a particular method: situation, task, action, result. Okay, I practice sitting with a positive posture, like I am at the moment. Very positive posture. Maybe your legs slightly open, your back straight, uh, your your head kind of straight. Um, no slouching, that kind of thing. And now, I've added one little component here called "If I Were You." We use this quite often, sometimes. So it's a slightly more informal expression, but if I were you, I'd research writing the perfect statement on an application form. Okay. If I were you, I'd practice sitting with a positive posture. Okay. Now, the next one is you should, you ought to, you could always. These again are very commonly used in English when giving advice to someone. Here are some examples. You should practice selling yourself during an interview or when applying for a job. You should develop your ability to answer interview questions using the STAR method. Now, you ought to and you should are synonymous, by the way. They have the same implication. Okay. Okay. This is not so. This is more advice, not really strong advice. It's norm. It's kind of generally very kind of calm and polite. Okay. You ought to start registering in as many employment agencies as you can. You ought to begin reading the spec which comes with every job post. You could always practice answering questions with a friend. Okay. Now, going back to this, you ought to, you can say you ought to. Say it. You ought to. You ought to start registering in as many employment agencies as you can. You ought to begin. You ought to begin. It's the schwa sound. We don't say you ought to. You ought to. You ought to. You could always. You could always practice. You could always practice. Okay, try and practice the sound until it rolls off the tongue. This is the importance about spoken language. Okay. Okay, next one is it might be a good idea to. Have you thought about? Maybe you could. One thing you could do is, okay. Now I've noticed I've included verb or gerund. The verb being the simple form, okay, of the verb, and gerund being the verb plus ing. So have you thought about going? Have you thought about playing? Have you thought about seeing? Okay, but the other ones are the simple form. It might be a good idea to be. It might be a good idea to look. Okay, look for. Okay, so um, looking at some examples of these, it might be a good idea to apply for several jobs per day. Obviously, very good advice. I would recommend that to everyone. Have you thought about applying for jobs on tfl.com, which is a famous teaching website, believe it or not? Maybe you could see a careers officer next week. Now, careers officers are very, very common in the UK. They help mostly young people find a job suitable for them, normally between 16, 18, 19 years old. They also do see adults as well. Last time I saw a careers officer must have been when I was in my 20s, but they are there, across the ages. Maybe you could see a careers officer, so mention that. One thing you could do is draft your final statement before sending it. Okay, drafting means you create a practice draft and then you can improve it draft by draft. Okay, so here are some strong advice actually. And now we have I really think you should. I really think you ought to. I really think you ought to. Okay, really can be slightly emphasized as well. I really think. Okay, so I really think you should apply for 3 jobs per day. I really think you ought to feel bad, I'll say that again. I really think you ought to not feel bad every time you get a rejection. That's sound advice, because it's very easy to feel hurt when you've been rejected and you feel like you're back to the drawing board. But don't feel dispirited for that, okay? Okay, so very strong advice, okay? You really need to, plus verb. You have to, plus verb. You've gotta, we say you've gotta, it means you've got to, but you've gotta, plus verb, okay? Now, there is an alternative here, you must, but that is correct grammatically, you must, but we don't often say that in English, especially natural language. We tend to say you've gotta, okay? It's a more naturalistic expression, okay? Plus verb. The best thing to do is plus verb. Now, let's look at some examples of this. You need to, or you really need to check job ads on the site every day. Very, very sound advice. We say sound advice, okay? You just have to, or you have to. Now that just it adds emphasis to what you're saying. You just have to. You can say that, or you can omit it as well. So you can say you have to get to the interview 15 minutes early. So that's obviously strong advice, because that's really protocol actually for most interviews. They expect you there 15 minutes earlier, okay? Okay, you've got to answer the questions with a clear example. Again, another bit of sound advice. Most interviews with the STAR method, or you need to include a concrete example of your practices with every single question they ask, okay? The best thing to do is practice before you arrive at the interview. Obviously, go through a practice or 2 with a friend or with your reflection in the mirror, and everything's perfect. So there you go. Hope that you found that useful. There are other expressions we can use and exponents we can use for giving advice, but these are the main ones, okay? But obviously feel free to look for alternative expressions as well. Okay, until next time, tune into my next video coming out very, very soon. And anyway, looking forward to seeing you again. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day and take care.